Hey, this is CB Smallwood, and welcome to Mental Junk Food, where we talk about all things comics, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, pop culture, and everything in between. And today we're going to get into some sensitive subject matter, and that is some controversy, I guess. I don't know how to put it other than just to be blunt and come right out and say it. Apparently, Charlie Brown is racist now. So, before I go any further, I just want to let you know that this article comes to you via comicbook.com. And here's the headline: Charlie Brown Thanksgiving viewers are upset by racist scene. Okay. Now I'm going to read a few quick paragraphs from here to give you the lowdown on what happened, and then I'm going to offer you a little bit of a rebuttal to this, and then I'll follow it up with my insight for whatever that may be worth to you. So, and I quote, "Tonight, ABC aired the classic animated Peanuts special, A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. And while many fans turned in for a warmth of nostalgia to kick off their holiday season, many came away with a less than fuzzy feeling when it came to how one specific character was treated. The special centers around a somewhat impromptu holiday meal that happens when Peppermint Patty invites herself and several others over to Charlie Brown and Sally's house for Thanksgiving, despite the fact that they are preparing to go to their grandmother's for the feast." Okay, let me take a break and sip my Coca-Cola here. My throat's a little dry. I apologize. After a little help from Linus, who convinces Charlie that they can have two Thanksgivings, as well as Woodstock and Snoopy, who do the cooking, a friend's Thanksgiving is on. Now the meal: butter toast, pretzel sticks, popcorn, jelly beans, and ice cream sundae, is served at the table in the backyard, while all's well that ends well, with everyone ending up invited to Charlie and Sally's grandmother's meal. It's the seating arrangements at this unusual dinner that has some fans on social media heated. Franklin, the one and only black friend in the group, is seated by himself on one side of the table while the other is crowded with the rest of the friends. And on top of that, he's sitting, I should say, in a lawn chair as opposed to everyone else's proper furniture. Okay, now, I don't know. Okay, here we go. A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving first aired back in November 20th of 1973 on CBS. All right, so that's when it first aired. So here's what people have to say about the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. Vic says, "Not watching Charlie Brown Thanksgiving anymore until they set some people on the same side of the table as Franklin." Oh man, my throat is dry. And here's a good picture that kind of shows you what happened. I mean, clearly, it does show. Everybody's sitting on one side here, and I don't think they're sorry, they're all the same chairs. Here's a brown chair. Here's maybe a green chair. This looks like something different that she's sitting on. Charlie Brown is sitting in a brown chair, and she is sitting in a kind of like looks like a red rocker. And Franklin's over here in this kind of outdoor recliner thing. So I don't know about the idea that the Charlie Brown cast, every one of them has comfy chairs, and poor Franklin is got the worst chair. I don't. I mean, I can see what people's saying about stuff, but I don't think the chair really fits in this whole argument. I just want to say that right now. But I do think that it is fair to say that it is a bit odd that poor Franklin is sitting by himself and everybody else is sitting to one side of the table. So there is, an argument for that. So Michael Greer goes on to say, "Dang, Charlie Brown, four on one side and no one by Franklin. Did they give him lots of dessert for reparations, I guess. Yesum wrote, I am woke now. Why is Franklin in Charlie Brown Thanksgiving sitting all by himself at the table? Man, things that I did not notice as a child. So, pretty much the rest of these is, something to that effect. But, here's something that I would like to point out to you all. This originally aired back in 1973, if I remember correctly. But the creator of Peanuts, Charlie Brown, stuff like that, I think his name is Charles Schulz. And Charles Schulz did something that was controversial back in the day, which was he introduced the Franklin character. Okay? And when you watch these old shows like this, and you may notice some things, you have to keep in mind in the time period when these shows were made. And you have to study a little bit of the history to gain perspective. Peanuts, Charlie Brown, all this other stuff, it's not racist. Let me show you this article here. And this article was written July 31st of 2015. Okay, this comes to you courtesy of the Washington Post, where for some reason democracy dies in the darkness. And it says, Franklin integrated Peanuts 47 years ago today. Here's how a teacher changed comics history. All right. If you scroll down here, it says, okay, I'm going to have to read this whole thing apparently. It is a gentle afternoon in this Connecticut office park where several floors up, a lighting artist is herself backlit by the glinting summer sun. The Peanuts movie is in the home stretch of production. Ahead of its November release, and here at Blue Sky Studios, the look and line of creator Charles M. Schulz are meriting both intense allegiance and 3D reinvention. I love how that rolls off the tongue. So at this moment, in that spirit, Jeon Song Chishon, hope I pronounced that right, pauses before the screen, her right hand resting on a tablet as she sharpens the film's big dance scene. And behold, there is Snoopy and Charlie Brown and Pigpen. And there is Franklin. We have to light him differently from Charlie Brown, says Chishon, the film's South Korean-born lighting supervisor, taking great care as she adjusts the palette one day last week. There's an awareness that nearly a half a century after Franklin was created, thereby integrating America's beloved comic strip, he still resonates as not just a character, but also a symbol of cultural illumination. Now, before going further, this is where it's going to get interesting. This will put it in perspective for you. What the deal is with this. Okay, when you hear this article, I'm getting ready to throw down at you. I think you'll look at this in a different light than what it's being presented today. Okay, and I quote, because when Schulz introduced his first Peanuts character of color 47 years ago today, the creation wasn't just about one comic strip. It also became about providing a mainstream visual for integration in the throes of the turbulent 60s. And Franklin was born because one woman, in the immediate wake of Reverend Martin Luther King's assassination, felt the need to act and reach out in some small way, searching for a ray of hope in the darkness of a racist and political violence. Getting a little tongue twisted here. I was a retired teacher at the time, says Harriet Glickman, quick and elegantly articulate while speaking by phone Friday. She had taught outside Los Angeles and Burbank before turning to other careers while raising her 3 children. It was in April of 1968, and King had just been gunned down in Memphis. I was thinking about Dr. King, about having lived through so many struggles and racism and the divisiveness that existed. Glickman, now 88, tells me. Her parents had raised her in the Depression era with a strong social conscience. Now, This was a culmination that was so painful that I needed to do something. So I decided to write. Because she had worked with kids and had kids of her own, Glickman was especially aware of the power of comics among the young. And my feeling at the time was that I realized that black kids and white kids never saw themselves depicted together in the classroom, says Glickman, noting that Maury Turner's diverse comic We Pals was still a budding feature. And so she wrote to several syndicated strip cartoonists, from Peanuts to Merryworth, with the idea of cartoon integration. Alan Saunders, who was very thoughtful, he sent a long letter and communicated for quite a while. Glickman says that the Merryworth scripter, he and artist Ken Ernst wanted to do something like that, but was afraid that the syndicate, or I think I'm pronouncing it right, syndicate, would drop him. Glickman also received a prompt reply from Sparky Schultz up in the Coast Bay Area. The Peanuts creator appreciated her input and liked the idea, she says, but he also shared the reasons for his reservations, including whether he, as a white creator, could write a black character without unintended condescension. Glickman decided to write back and suggested that she could seek input from African American friends who were parents. With his permission, I shared this letter, she recalls. Ken Kelly was an old friend and a father of two. And I also asked Monica Gunning. Those two parents wrote Schultz themselves, urging the integration of Peanuts. And a short time later, Glickman received a response from the cartoonist. Schultz said that he got the letters, she recalls, and I'd be pleased with the upcoming Peanuts story. And Schultz had drawn strips that introduced Franklin, son of a father who's off in Vietnam, as a new regular kid who plays at the beach. And the storyline was set to begin 31st of July, 1968. Sparky was faced with a question ahead of the publication, who said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Glickman says. If you know Sparky, you know what his response was. He said, "Either you run it the way I drew it, or I quit." Now, before I quote this any further, I want you to etch this in your mind. If you want to copy and paste this little quote or whatever, keep this in mind. The creator of Charlie Brown, of the Peanuts comic strip, all that good stuff, when people were talking about taking Franklin, I'm trying to think how to phrase it. Well, just the black kid from the show. He said, "You either run it the way I drew it, or I quit." And so when people say that Charlie Brown was racist back then, keep that in mind. The creator of the show says, if you take this guy out, I quit. Not necessarily out of this special, because this happened long before the special, I believe. Okay, but needless to say, he stuck to his ground, and we got Franklin as part of the Peanuts cast. So I continue. Peanuts, at this point, of course, was already one of the preeminent comic strips in the world, followed and beloved by tens of millions of readers. He was the voice in comics at the time, Glickman emphasizes. United wasn't about to lose Schultz over this. And so, 47 years ago today, Franklin joined the Peanuts gang. The introduction made the predictable cultural ripples. Schultz received some messages from the South, from editors saying, "Please don't send us any more strips with black children in the classroom, while with white children. We're going through a forced integration in our schools, and we don't want to see any more of these strips," Glickman recounts. Schultz was famous, of course, for doubling down if you told him that something couldn't be done. Several years earlier, he included Bible passages in TV's A Charlie Brown Christmas, after being challenged on Linus's monologue from the book of Luke. So naturally, Franklin was now a fixture. So I'm not going to read the rest of this article, which there wasn't much left to read anyway. I read the whole thing. I'm sorry, Washington Post. But, I recommend you go to the Washington Post and, share this article. Check it out. It's Franklin Integrated Peanuts. Okay? Check that out. But my point is that I want to bring up about people getting upset about, Franklin sitting by himself. I do believe that there is, I hate to say it, a racist element to it, but you have to keep in mind two things off the top of my head. Is first of all, the creator of Peanuts, Charles Schulz, he fought for Franklin to be part of the cast, to be part of Peanuts, to be part of the Charlie Brown gang. He fought for him to be there. He threatened to quit. And, he doubled down on this. When he got angry letters from the South, from different various editors, he would not back down. Now, the second point I want to make is the reason Franklin is sitting by himself. I see this as a compromise. In 1973, I see this as a compromise because I imagine that there was people saying, don't put Franklin in a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special. I can't say that for sure. I don't know that for sure. But based on this article I just read right here, I can guarantee you that more than likely somebody was probably arguing for Franklin to not even be in this show. And it wouldn't surprise me if Charles Schulz said, put him in it. He sits at the table. Now, sure, he sits on one side and everybody sits on another. But that was probably the best compromise that they could come up with in 1973. But, that's one of the reasons I argue that you have to look at things in the context of the time that they happen in. If it's H.P. Lovecraft stories, you have to look at them in the time that they were written in. If it's a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving cartoon, you have to look at it in the time that it was written in or wrote or animated in or what have you, and judge it by that. By modern standards, you can say, yeah, it does look pretty racist, him sitting by himself. But you have to keep in mind that it is this generation's responsibility to see that not only is Franklin not sitting by himself anymore, but he's actually more part of the cast than he ever was. Another good example before I leave off this topic is that I remember in the original Star Trek, I think her name is Uhura. I'm more of a Star Trek Next Generation fan, okay? But in the original Star Trek, I think her name's Uhura. She was sort of like the communications officer. She wore the red outfit. She was a black woman with a red outfit, and she was a communications officer. And that, for a lot of African Americans growing up, or people, they're referred to as minorities, when they were growing up, she was sort of like a hero, I guess, I remember hearing an interview about Whoopi Goldberg saying that, she looked up to her, because she says, Mom, look, there's somebody that looks like me on Star Trek, So, I don't, I think people are getting a little too upset a little bit about a bunch of nothing, in my opinion. Well, they should look at this cartoon in the context that it was made in. There was people in the 70s and somewhat in the 60s that were trying to put more of the true American face in cinema and cartoons, animation, everywhere. So that way a true one America, as it actually existed, could be seen by everybody. And sometimes there were compromises that were made back then, but like I said before, it's this generation. It's up to us to just continue fully integrating things, the work that they started in the 60s and 70s and beyond. That I made that reference to the original Star Trek about I think her name again is Uhura, the character's name, who was a communications officer. And the interesting thing is when J.J. Abrams rebooted the series, the movies, the Star Trek movies, she actually became, I think, the love interest of Spock. So that's really cool. That was an interesting dynamic. I thought it was pretty neat. So that's something to keep in mind. So please let me know what you think down in the comments section down below. Do you think Charlie Brown is racist, or do you think that you should view it in the context of the time that it was made in, and see that Charles Schultz fought for civil rights and was a big proponent of it, and should be actually praised for even having Franklin in the show? Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. And folks, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And listen, by the end of the year, if you think my videos are terrible, you can always unsubscribe, but help me get to 1,000. Just humor me. And if you like this video, please remember to hit that like button. I enjoy reading each and every one of your all's comments, so leave me a comment in the comment section down below. I've probably already said that. And as always, this is CB Smallwood, and I will see you in the next video.